Hello and welcome. I am the Reckless Tiger.
I'm Johnny B.
I'm Woolly Mike.
And I'm Andy from Friends of General Haig.
But together we are
Modelling for Advantage. Right, we catch up with the people in the chat. Early adopters, we have Rich John. He's working on some one-page rules, trying to put off painting my blame blade. That's going to take a while, mate. I'd make a start if you want to get that done ever. Stay at home and work today so I can catch a bit of the show before I pick up my kid. Love it, mate. Love it. Gary's here. Ham and Jam is here. Nick from Team Clueless Games working on Blood Bowl Troll. That's going to smash JB's stunty tomorrow night.
No, it's not.
It's your regular Blood Bowl fixture, is it, John, tomorrow?
It is, yeah.
What will you be playing?
Blood Bowl.
What team, you prick?
Dwarves, like he says.
All right, okay, yeah. Liz Pirate Painting. Subs is here. Just finished watching Alex over here. Now over. Oh, Alex Storm of Steel, Alex. Yeah, he streams right before us. Just been playing out with some old giant monsters using Pacific Rim figures.
Oh, love a bit of rim.
And Subs is drinking cider. So there we go.
Good choice. Good choice.
Hobbying tonight. I am still tidying up some of my old black tree here, German World War II. So I'm going to be putting some flock and some tufts and things like that on. Mike, what are you up to?
Well, Universal Carrier. You took me over to Lost Ark Games at Stevenage on Saturday, and I ended up spending money. So I'm building the Universal Carrier for bolt action, but I'm putting power in it rather than normal infantry.
Roger. Jibbies?
Yeah, I mean, obviously staying in, the same era as the Friends of General Haig's topic tonight. I'll be painting an M5 still.
We're all doing what to.
Is that flaming thingy?
Yeah, Andy, have you got any hobbying on the desk, sir? Or are you going to be too busy, hopefully, talking?
I just don't think I can cope with the two things at once.
Too much going on.
Yeah, I'll fall off my chair. I can't concentrate, present a slideshow, and hobby. I find it very difficult.
Yeah.
Too much.
Well, I hardly get any done either, but I make an attempt.
Same. It's a bit mission match. Before we get into the meat and tatties of it, please, can you tell the folks at home who you are, Andy, and where they can find you on the tinterwebs, please?
Yeah, so my name's Andy. I'm from a war games group called the Friends of General Haig, and we're based loosely around the Worcestershire area. So if you Google the Friends of General Haig, you will find our website and all the details about how you can come along and play toy soldiers with us. And I've got a blog as well called the Via Regia, VIAREGIA.com, which has got lots of interesting info on the figures I've been painting and stuff. So so check those out.
Nice.
There are links to both of those things in the description. Andy sent me the links ahead of time, so I'll put them in there. Right, so tonight, as we've got Andy here, who is both very wise on account of his multitude of grey hair. You notice that leads to wisdom, you know. When we were at Salute 50 this year, Andy had a magnificent display table, and we didn't see it because Salute was that big. And when I saw his pictures go up later, I was gutted. I was like, oh my God, we missed you. So he's come on the show tonight to talk to us about the display game that they put on and a bit of the history behind that battle. Is that right, Andy?
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Yes, I thought that's a good opportunity to talk about and perhaps not very well known amongst wargamers bit of 17th century history.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Shall I bring up the slideshow then? Shall we begin?
Yes. I'm hopefully sharing it.
Look at that. Brian Blessed
look at
and
that.
some other dudes. Nice.
So this is the Battle of Dirchau, or Tczew in Polish. So Dirchau is the German name for the town, and Tczew
The German name. Excellent.
is so that's how Arnie would say it. And,
Exactly.
Tczew is the Polish name. Now, I must apologize to any Polish listeners to the show because my Polish pronunciation is awful. Absolute was very lucky. A very nice Polish gentleman came and admired the game, and he was trying to help me with the pronunciation to pronounce the name of the town in Polish, and I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. I failed miserably, even with intense coaching. So apologies for me murdering the Polish pronunciation,
which is presumably why the name Dirchau persists, because all of the writers can't pronounce
it in Polish. Yeah.
Okay. So to begin with, then we got these two magnificent gentlemen here. These are very gourmand type chaps. Why have they got such tiny heads?
I think they both look like chaps who've enjoyed a meal or two in their time, don't they? So
they pass on the skimmed milk for sure.
So these are the two generals at the battle, and I thought there aren't many pictures of Stanislaw Konopalski. So he's the Polish general. So their generals were called hetman, and so he's the field crown hetman, which means he's sort of almost the top position in the army.
Right.
So very experienced general, fought for many years, leading the Polish army, and then of course the other guy's probably more famous on the international stage is Gustav Adolf, the King of Sweden. And I quite like that picture of him because not only is obviously red, it looks outrageously good on him, but he's wearing a sort of Hungarian styled coat. So it was quite interesting that they're both sort of playing a sort of again, they're both wearing sort of Hungarian style clothing, which is terribly fashionable in the East at this period.
Right. Now, these two guys then, I don't know whether you're going to talk a little bit about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in a minute anyway, but this is kind of the beginning of that golden age for Sweden, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. So this is sort of Poland goes on to have a sort of 100 years from this period where it becomes a really major power in Europe and especially in the East, and very much kicked off by Gustav and his line, as it were. So so there's by the 1700s we've got the Great Northern War and all the different Charleses going through, the kings of Sweden, who are sort of really kicking bottom and taking names, as I say. So it's a real big period for Sweden.
Wow.
All right. Well, you are in control of the slides, sir. Master of the destinies.
Right. So just I think the first slide is a sort of picture of what's probably quite famous to wargamers, which are Polish winged stars. And this is just a sort of me admitting about why I sort of really got into this period. Was I'd always really fantasized about getting Polish winged hussars, and so that it wasn't any sort of deep historical thing that really got me into this period. Although I've become more interested in it now, it was really just these guys being the sort of the pin-up poster boys of the period. I was thinking that it was a bit sort of like older war gamers don't get leather jackets and buy motorbikes; they buy Polish winged hussars. So that's my that's my excuse. So that's what sort of got me into this period.
Because those wings, they are magnificent looking troops, aren't they?
They are, and they were. It's obviously one of the big controversies is, did they wear those wings in battle? So they definitely had the wings.
Don't ever ask questions like that. You're only going to disappoint yourself.
Definitely did.
So they look. So they're basically we'll go on and we'll talk a bit more in detail about them. But they wear the epitome of the Polish army, and especially in this early 17th century period, the Polish army is very much formed around this hard-hitting core of armored lancers. The rest of Europe has rather gone away to sort of trotting around with pistols, where these guys are still charging hard with lances, and these guys are
And
also
maces and axes for close
Yeah.
range, right? Yeah.
So they'll probably have a pistol, or as this period goes on, they'll get a couple of pistols. They've got probably they're carrying a saber, because every noble in Poland would be carrying a saber. And they'll also then have a longer sword for sort of trying to break through enemy armor, and as you say, a sort of mace or a horseman's axe, which is a really nasty sort of looking weapon. You can see the officer there has got it carrying its sort of hammer on one side and a nasty spike on the other, a really nasty
for hard target.
Yeah. And they were very fashionable to actually just carry around when you were sort of just visiting the bars in the evening, and they tried to ban them because they became a bit of a fashion accessory, so everybody was carrying around this really sort of nasty weapon. And of course, when drunken brawls broke out, you
don't want your patrons armed in a pub. No.
So they tried to ban them because they were people from just carrying them around. But so that's but this was the elite of the Polish nobility. So these were very wealthy, especially. So the guys in the front rank would be the sort of the companions, the nobles, and their followers in the second rank would be their sort of guys they brought along to assist. But they're wearing animal pelts, tigers and leopard pelts and things like that as well. So anything, lots of bling.
We talked about this a bit last time, because you talked about other continental cavalry to a great extent in this period. It's fighting with pistols from horseback. It's not that shock cavalry isn't that much of a thing in everybody else's army. Over the sort of preceding 80 or so years, the lance has sort of fallen out of common use in the rest of Europe. And the pistol firepower has become, the popular thing, but the Poles have sort of clung on to this to the spear and the lance, as have most of the cavalry, sort of in this area. Right.
So,
right.
So they're a bit different. So,
okay. And is that because the infantry in this area is different?
Yes, to a degree. The all the armies here, it's because I guess because it's everything's in a bigger scale in terms of the areas that armies are fighting over, and so I think it's encouraged everyone to be mounted. So this is the area of where the Mongols hoarded, etc. A few hundred years before here, and the Teutonic Knights. And so the armies in this area tend to be more cavalry based, and so infantry have had a less importance put on them. Although in this period, with the rise of the armies in Western Europe getting larger, places like Poland and Muscovy, or Russia, which will become Russia, are starting to import that idea and want to train their infantry to be pike and shot infantry.
Right, but because of the lower population density, there's much more of a mounted kind of a combat environment. Yeah,
I think just bigger, the sort of bigger areas to cover and things, and I suppose that so if I just gonna go but and sort of delve into a bit of history just to sort of put this in context.
Oh, look, red.
So this is a sort of interesting. So this is a map of Europe, and so this is right at the end of the 16th century, so 1592 to 1599. This is the extent of Poland, the Polish-Lithuanian Swedish Union. So it's actually a massive territory. So King Sigismund III Vasa, he actually, so his northern extent of Sweden's almost up to the Arctic Circle, all the way down to the Black Sea, is the area that he's ruling over. So he's one of the largest, well, probably the largest territory in Europe, and probably the largest population, only rivaled by France in this period. And this is the greatest extent that, in effect, Poland rules, because in in 1599, Sigismund is deposed as King of Sweden by his uncle. So Sigismund had come to power. Originally, he was the son of the King of Sweden, and he had married the daughter of the King of Poland. And when the King of Poland died, the Polish Parliament had voted Sigismund to be the next king. They had an interesting, very, I guess you could say, progressive in one way of deciding who was going to be king. They didn't distribute swords in lakes or whatever, but in effect, the Parliament would decide who was going to be king. And so they obviously tended to favour the sons of whoever been the king previously if he was popular. But in this case, they chose to import this Swedish prince as their king, and so Sigismund became king of Poland. And then when his father died, who was king of Sweden, he then inherited the Swedish throne as well. But the challenge was, and we're going back to this religious thing for this whole period, is that Sigismund was a zealous Roman Catholic, and Sweden, the majority of the nobles in Sweden at this time were Lutheran, so they were Protestant. And so a lot of the late 16th century was the Swedish nobility trying to get rid of Sigismund, which they then managed to do. And so Charles, and I forget which Charles it is, but Sweden gets another King Charles, who's Sigismund's uncle, and he takes over from Sweden, and Sweden then sort of drops down to that sort of size in terms of it loses the Swedish bit, but it in effect then kicks off this dynastic rivalry then, in that Sigismund still considers himself King of Sweden and still claims the Swedish throne, whereas Sweden's now, as far as they're concerned, they've got a new king, and they're very happy, thank you very much. And so Sweden and Poland then become the big rivals in this area. And as you were saying, Kaiser, this sort of, this is the start of the rise of Sweden as a big power.
Yeah, and why Sweden is, even as late as 1800, there's Swedish Pomerania. There's bits of North Germany owned by a Swedish duke. Yeah.
I mean, they pick up Pomerania in the 30 Years' War. That's one of the big things they get out of the negotiation in 1648 at the end of the 30 Years' War. Right. So that's one of the big things they pick up.
So you'd had long before this, you'd kind of had this whole area had been Christianized through the Crusades that no one ever talks about. Yeah, if you're German or Polish, you know about it. And out of that, so how was this Polish-Lithuanian Union? How has that come about? Do you know?
Yeah, so in this area, I think in this era, that the idea of nationhood is a bit different to how we tend to think of. We live in a country and we belong to this country. And so it was a lot more fluid. There were a lot more smaller states or dukedoms and areas that made up kingdoms. And two of in effect, Poland and Lithuania. So sort of Lithuania is the sort of top right-hand pit of this red blob, as it were, in this period. So the Duchy of Lithuania had merged at some point with Poland, and so that's why
dynastically, people got married. It ended up in the hands of the same person. Yeah,
that's right. And so they merged. So they had some things that were still different. So they still technically had different generals, and their armies were separate. But to all intents and purposes, really, they were they had a single overall ruler.
Right.
And so this hence the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth is this proper term, but it's obviously just a lot easier to say Polish, but it technically was a joint area.
and presumably forming big blocks like this. I don't know how conscious it was, but the bits that we're not seeing on this map is to the south, you've got a vast empire, the Ottomans. To the south and west, you've got another vast empire, the Holy Roman Empire. You know, and beyond that, a Spanish empire. They're being a small dukedom or a princedom is probably not a good idea in Europe at this point. Most people are in some kind of larger federation.
Yes.
You know, whether it's called an empire, a commonwealth, or whatever it is, they're all kind of part of these bigger blocks, I guess. There's a degree of political safety that comes with that.
Yeah, definitely. So that's very true, and of course to their east, to Poland's east, of Lithuania's east, is
the Rus are forming Muscovy.
Yeah,
which is another huge empire.
Yes,
it's forming. Yeah.
And that they're going to have their day, at the beginning of the 18th century with Peter the Great, etc. So. So Poland is surrounded by all these other powerful competitors. So in effect, this conflict between Poland and Sweden is a mixture of this dynastic rivalry, because Sigismund and Gustav both consider themselves king of Sweden. But it's also a big commercial thing, because there's a lot. It all comes down to trade. They're all trying to control the trade through the Baltic, in that Baltic area, and who can have the most influence on that. And so, Gustav Adolf, when he comes to the throne at the start of 1609, he inherits from his father, and he then. From the very start of his reign, he is fighting either Denmark or the Muscovites or Poland, and so he inherits a quite old-fashioned, ineffective army, and his whole career as king and general is all about how he tries to improve his army from being sort of one of the most backward in Europe to sort of rocking the established empires in Europe through his military feats. So that makes him quite an interesting character to follow. So and just to sort of compare that blob with how it looks today. So those countries are sort of as they sort of vaguely appear on the map today. So you can see Poland and Lithuania, Latvia, Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. So you can see how massive that Poland is compared to the Poland, how the extent that Poland covers now, and how that sort of changed, which is all quite interesting. So you start something looking at just Polish winged hussars, and then end up getting all into the sort of the history of it as well. So I wanted Polish winged hussars, and I had some Swedes, and I discovered that that Gustav Adolf had sort of cut his teeth fighting the Poles because of this big rivalry with his cousin Sigismund, and so that just seemed like an ideal place to go with my next project. Was if I can have Polish winged hussars, and I've already got one of the armies. That seems like an ideal project. So I started looking at which battles they fought. So in the 16...
Where they fought one another?
Yeah. And so in the 1626 and 1629, there is the War of the Vistula Estuary, which was all around in this... I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen. It's all around this bit where it says Rus on the map underneath the Baltic Sea. So it's
the Vistula being a big river that runs through the middle of central Poland, and Warsaw is on the Vistula, right? In fact, Napoleon has a Vistula Legion.
That's right. Right.
It's the famous bit of Poland geographically.
That's right. So where the Vistula goes into the Baltic Sea, there is a town called Danzig. Or a major city called Danzig, and that's a huge commercial hub in this period. And so Gustav has a sort of multi-year campaign where he is trying to capture Danzig, because if he can capture Danzig, he sort of throttles Poland's trade into the whole Baltic area. So that's the idea behind his campaign. And so there's a handful of battles to look at. And so I picked the one with the most difficult to pronounce name.
Beautiful.
Called Dirchau. And
nice.
And so this is a really lucky find, which was in the early part of the 20th century. The Swedish General Staff decided to write a history of all the wars that Sweden had been in, and so they obviously spent years and years tramping around Europe and basically writing this history of all the wars of Sweden. And it included, obviously, this period, 1626 to 1629. And so they've written these drawn these beautifully detailed maps of all the battles. And a lot of them are available like this slightly skew-whiff scan that I found on the internet of the battle. And you can see on the right-hand side here, you can see the Vistula River, massive river running north south. So the top of the screen is north, and you've got this little town of Dirchau, the walled town of Dirchau, just on its banks. And so this map was really useful in terms of helping me understand the battle and how I was going to then sort of build the terrain and everything to go with it, because it's not a terribly well studied battle in the English language. There's a lot of Swedish accounts written about it, and a lot of Polish accounts. But this map really helped give me some context.
It's interesting just how much this battlefield has been dominated by that river. That very much blocks off the left flank.
Yeah. So the big components of the battle, and what another reason I thought this would be interesting. So you've got a town, and you can see all these lines here are in effect the earthwork fortifications, because it's a medieval walled town, and so obviously the Swedes dug modern earthworks around it to defend it after. So the Swedes sort of came across the river and captured the town, dug the earthworks, and so that was quite an interesting piece of terrain to build. And the Poles established their camp on the other side of this marshy stream area, so that's quite an interesting area. And the sort of north part of the battlefield is constrained by this. This is actually you can see it says canal. This was a canal that was dug to take some water around to the town. And then there's this sort of bit of high rough ground, which delineates the bottom of the battlefield. So there's a sort of nice delineated battlefield in which the battle was fought. So that was good. And obviously, then when I looked at the orders of battle, there were a good number of Polish winged hussars, which was obviously big.
Which is what you were looking for.
Yeah. So that was a big tick. And it's an interesting battle because from the if you read the Wikipedia article, which I did, that's definitely where I always start. Is that's the first thing you find on Google. The sort of the reason Dirchau is famous is because it's the sort of the first battle where the Swedes don't get swept away by the Poles in an open battle.
Yeah, well, you mentioned they dug these fortifications, and yet they've come out to fight. So they obviously think that they're obviously expecting to win, actually, because they don't have to fight here. They can escape by sea anytime they want. Yeah, and they've got fortifications, so they choose to put up a fight, right?
Yes, yeah. So the sort of strategic position at this point is that, as I said, the Swedes have captured Dirchau and invested it and dug the fortifications around it. And this is their step across the Vistula. And now they want to march north, and because they've discovered that at Danzig, the western side of Danzig is less well defended than the eastern side. So they think if they can get across the river downstream and then march north, they can take Danzig. But while Poniatowski, Poniatowski, you got me on with the Vistula
He's
Legion.
Napoleon now. Back to Napoleon.
Koniopolski. He's got his Polish army, and so he's quite safe over this side of them, over the marshes. So he knows that while he's got an army here, Gustav can't march north. The Swedes can't march north. So that they have this sort of stalemate, that the Poles don't have the infantry and artillery to assault and take the Swedish earthworks at Dirchau, and Gustav doesn't feel very confident fighting the Poles. So that there'd been a famous battle where Gustav's father had lost to the Poles, and the Swedish army had been completely swept away by. It's the most famous sort of victory of the Polish Hussars, perhaps. If you're a Hussar nerd, it's probably even more famous than Vienna in 1683, where the Polish winged Hussars break the siege and defeat the Ottomans at Vienna.
Right.
And so this is Tczew. And ever since then, the Swedes have been very nervous about fighting the Poles in an open battle. And so Gustav's had to fight a very canny campaign of fighting battles, but not where
big ones.
Not big ones, not where there's an open battle where the Poles can really use their cavalry to an advantage.
Right.
So we've got this sort of stalemate situation.
And they can't hear, right? Because you mentioned this battle is there seems to be enough space to deploy the troops, but both of the flanks are pretty closed.
Yeah.
Because of the canal to the north and the rough ground to the south. They can only come at us, and we're okay with that.
Yes, yeah. So the Swedes think they've got nicely secure flanks. So this has been going on sort of July or start of August, middle of August. This sort of stalemate has been going on, and both sides have been getting used to the status quo. And there's actually a peace delegation of Dutch from the Netherlands in the Polish camp at this period. Now the Dutch are quite keen to broker a peace, because it's very bad. War's very bad for business. So they're trying to get a peace treaty signed. Yeah. And Koniopolski becomes convinced that while the peace negotiations are going on in his camp with these Dutch merchants, that the Swedes won't do anything. So some of the Polish troops are sort of dispersed to sort of gather fodder, etc.
Yeah, forage, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then on the 17th of August, the Swedish sort of scouts and some dragoons and stuff start appearing at the crossing points over the marshes. There are these two main crossing points near the Polish camp, and so the Poles then send out some of their scouts to throw the Swedish ones back, and the Swedish ones get reinforced, and this starts to escalate to the point where Koniopolski then has to sort of call out call out the whole army, because he's concerned that he could lose the crossings, and if he loses the crossing points, then that's going to make things much more difficult for him. So the Polish cavalry mount up and ride out, and the Swedish sort of fall back in front of the Polish cavalry, and it's that sort of classic chase me sort of thing. So the Polish cavalry, the Swedish cavalry are sort of falling back to Dirchau, trying to get the Poles to follow them, and hoping that the Poles will rashly then just continue and charge into the earthworks and get devastated by the Swedish artillery. But the Poles are far too canny for that, and so the Poles halt their advance and wait to see if the Swedes will come out of their earthworks, but the Swedes don't. And so it's like, this is going to be, it's another disappointing, day for both sides. Nothing's really happy. So the Swedes start to pull back, and so it's late getting late in the day, and the Swedes, the Poles start to pull back over these crossing points and back into their camp. And there was obviously a point where Gustav could see that the Poles were now split across the marsh, and were sort of had lost their organization perhaps a bit, as they were they thought the day was over. And Gustav's able to bring out the Swedish cavalry very quickly and form them up and in effect attack the Polish cavalry while the Polish cavalry is split across the
trying to
crossing
cross. Right.
and a sort of major then battle ensues, and the Swedish cavalry do very well. They don't sweep away the Poles, but in some ways, because the Poles don't crush them completely, it's almost a great Swedish victory, because so because
they didn't get hammered.
Because they didn't get hammered.
We didn't lose everybody. Woo!
Yeah. So it's very hotly contested about how the 17th of August goes, whether it's a Swedish victory or a Polish victory. But the night ends, and darkness falls, and neither side can really claim victory. But the next day, the Gustav is confident enough that the Polish cavalry have been given such a bloody nose that he feels confident enough to actually attack the crossing points with his infantry. And he then brings out his infantry, which he's the two armies have got comparable size of cavalry. They've both got about 4,000, 5,000 cavalry. The Poles claim they've got a lot less cavalry because a lot of their troops are off gathering fodder and stuff. So there's a lot of dispute about how many cavalry the Poles had.
Right. Yeah.
But the Swedes have got about maybe 10,000 infantry, and the Poles have got maybe 3,000 infantry. So there's a lot more Swedish infantry, a lot more Swedish artillery. And this is Gustav's new army, his new fancy squadrons and brigade formation for his infantry. And this is the first time they use their fancy new formation. And they attack. The Polish cavalry stay, don't really come out of the camp. They decide just to use their infantry to hold these two crossing points. And so a big assault goes on all day. And I think Gustav was probably getting a bit frustrated why his troops weren't breaking through. And so he gets very close to the front line, and a Polish officer spots him and gets one of his marksmen to say, "Look, there's the Swedish king, bring him down." So and Gustav's hit in the
very unsportsmanly.
It is. There was none of this. We don't shoot at the enemy generals. There was definitely. There's the enemy general. Shoot at him.
There's a man in a big hat. Take a shot.
Yeah. Did you see his red coat? Yeah. So he takes a musket ball to the shoulder, which must have been incredibly painful, and he's carted from the field. So Gustav himself, thinks he may be dying, and he's obviously distraught, and hands over command to another Polish general, who presses home the attack, and that Polish general, Johann Banner, is also shot by a sniper. So the Poles obviously had some good snipers. It's allegedly some dragoons who were led by an Irishman called Butler. Although there are different accounts about who ordered the shot and who made the shots. But I quite like the idea of the Irish being there and sniping away.
Some Irish mercenary.
Yes, yeah. So both sides. I mean, interesting in this period. Both sides very heavily. They'll recruit anybody, and it's a period of people will hire themselves out. As mercenaries. So a lot of Germans fighting on both sides, and a lot of Irishmen, Scotsmen, and Englishmen fighting on both sides throughout the wars here. Yeah. So the battle then sort of with both two generals down, the Swedes then pull back, and the Swedes then don't feel able to press home the attack, and so in effect, strategically, it's a Polish victory because the Swedes can't advance on Danzig from this position, yes, but Gustav survives, but interestingly, because they don't get the musket ball out, and so he's got this musket ball in his right shoulder. And because he's got this musket ball here, he can't wear the back and breastplate armor anymore. It's too uncomfortable. So he stops wearing armor, and allegedly that's why he got killed at the Battle of Lutzen in 1632, was because he wasn't wearing his armor. Right. So that's a little interesting history snippet.
Because in this period, good armor is still proofed against musket balls.
Yes, yeah,
at
definitely.
range.
Definitely pistols, which are all the cavalry are, carrying a couple of pistols. So the armor, the back and breastplate is meant to be proof against pistols, and would definitely help you against those nasty hammers and swords and stuff. So so that's the battle that we were trying to recreate. So this.
There's no day 3.
There's no day 3, no. That because with Gustav down, the Swedes basically say, "Well, that's that. That's it." They decide they're not going to press the attack anymore.
All right.
And so they call it off.
Right. It's a really disappointing battle, to be honest, mate.
Yeah.
Presumably the campaign goes on.
So the campaign. So in the following year, it all turns into a naval war. In 1628. It turns into a naval war, and which turns into another bit of a stalemate. 1629, the major battle in 1629 is a running battle where the Swedish cavalry get chased over a very, very long way by the Polish cavalry and manage to get away. So it's not a terribly impressive battle for the Swedes in 1629. But then there's a peace treaty, and the Swedes do quite well in the peace treaty and keep some bits of Latvia and Lithuania that they've captured. And importantly, they get an agreement to peace with Poland, which allows Gustav to then enter the 30 Years' War in 1630. So that's where then his fame really comes, is when he enters and wins the big battle at Breitenfeld in 1630.
Right. So his better years are in future.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So then there's a picture here. This is how I sort of simplified the battle down, so I could sort of build it and play it on the War Games table, because trying to build an actual map with 28mm figures is a bit of a challenge. So I simplified that down, and so this is the town. I just had the sort of edge of Dirchau represented. So we've got some nice sort of resin stone walls and some resin buildings. And a friend of mine had this great idea to try and give that idea of the rest of the town going off into the distance. Yeah, it works quite well. A sort of nice little silhouette. Cool, yeah, I like that. And he even built he built little mirrors into the archways, so you got that sort of idea that the road is running through. So that was really clever. It's a railway modelling idea, apparently. Right. So that was really clever. So a lot of people like that, and it was so that's my mate.
Yeah, and it's purely cosmetic. It's just right in the back corner of the board on the Swedish side, isn't it? Yeah, that's just cosmetic.
Yes, yeah, just to sort of give that view, so you can see there the little road running off. And so then this is the battle in full swing. So you can see this is the Swedish army, and there in the background you can see the town of Dirchau and the Swedish entrenchments. And this is right at the start of the battle, and this is the Swedish army coming out now. Because we had one day at Salute, I wanted to get all of my toys on the table. I sort of combined the 2 days battle into a single day. So I had the Swedish cavalry coming out and surprising the Poles while the Poles are split across the marsh. But I also had the Swedish infantry backing them up so they could then follow up an attack straight away. And this is one of the village of Lunau. Once again, I can't pronounce the Polish version of that. It's the German name for the village, which was set on fire to stop anybody holding it. So it was basically set on fire. Not terribly good if you're one of the villagers.
No, but was generally quite bad if you live there.
Yes, yeah. And so then this is the Polish end of the table. So you can see the sort of marsh here, and the Polish army split across the camp. And so the advice to the Swedish players was, the Polish Hussars are, they're hot stuff. You've got to be careful of them, but there's lots of Polish winged Hussars on the other side of the marsh, so you've got to attack them while you've got the numbers, and they haven't. So I encourage the Swedes to be really aggressive as they were on the day, and accept that the Polish winged Hussars are very good. But you've got to try and swamp them before they get the numbers.
So Thomas Chases, is that teddy bear fur battle mat? That is a very hairy war game table.
It is definitely, yes. It is teddy bear fur. So I think actually the thing that people most interested in, the thing I spent most time talking about was the teddy bear fur. So it's
is that just one massive sheet?
It's actually three pieces. I haven't been able to find, if anybody knows somewhere which makes 6 foot wide teddy bear fur, I'd be really interested to find out, because I can find it 5 foot wide. So I can find rolls that are about just under 5 foot wide, which is not quite long and broad enough to go down the table. So I have to sort of stitch together different pieces. So that's actually 2 mats, teddy bear fur mats from a company called Killing Fields in the US. They're currently out of production, but they produce quite nice fur mats. But my other fur mats are just teddy bear fur bought from Amazon, which does equally well. And I've added colours and shaved it so that the grass is different lengths, and shaved the roads into it and stuff. It's great. It's so handy, easy to take. You just roll it up and chuck it in the back of the car. It's so easy to take around.
And when you say shaved it, is that like with a pair of clippers?
Yeah. So my favourite a pair of dog clippers. Apparently dog clippers work better than human hair clippers. I don't know what the difference is in clippers, but everyone says get dog clippers. So I just bought the cheapest pair of dog clippers I could on Amazon, and they're great. And you can then shave it down. You can give it a number 4 and just check it
right.
or take the guide off and go right down to the backing material and shave a road. So it's great.
Right.
Did you cry a little bit when the star of the show was teddy bear fur? And you're like, yeah, it's teddy bear fur, but look at these wings huzzahs. And they're like, how did you do the roast?
I hadn't until you mentioned it, Johnny. I hadn't thought.
Oh, okay. Apologies.
Did a quick clarification.
Died a little bit.
Cloth comes in what's called a bolt, and a bolt is 54 inches wide.
Right. There aren't bolts that are 72 inches then. Is a bolt's a standard thing then? Is it, Mike? You can just get.
Yeah. I checked. I remember working with some.
A bolt of cloth.
Yeah,
that's been around forever.
Right, so I'm never going to find
4 inches. Yeah. They may come in different widths, but I just double checked it because years ago I worked for a shipping company.
Yeah,
and they used to come in a standard box, and it's 54 inches wide.
Well, whilst you're googling that stuff, why don't you Google and see if you can find a 6-footer?
I'm sure Andy's tried Googling it, John. Right, yeah.
So the teddy bear fur is good. So,
but let's talk about the figures.
Yeah,
where are they all from?
I can see all the Renedra tents.
Yeah, they're classic Renedra tents. So a lot of different. I think I had a little info board. I think there were 9 different manufacturers. So I'll see now if I can remember them all. So obviously, so Warlord Games. I think probably Warlord Foundry. And the Assault Group tag are probably the big numbers of figures, but I've also got a good number from 1898 Miniatures. So they're a Spanish outfit. They're available in the UK from Empress. So they're lovely. They've just come out in the last few years. 30 years war figures, perfect for this period. Also some figures from a range that used to be called Bohemian Miniatures. Now they're actually also owned by Empress Miniatures now as well. Some Elite, no, not Elite. Sorry, First Corps. Elite, sadly, don't do any sort of First Corps. I think it was James from Seikos and Sprues asked me once, you must have some First Corps. And I was like, oh, actually, I don't have any First Corps. So I immediately went off and bought a unit just so I could say I've got some First Corps. As well. So some from Avonpost, who makes some very nice figures in resin. So they're very delicate, but they're really beautiful. Some Perry figures in there. and I'm starting to, my memory's starting to go. And then in the civilians, it's just, just everybody's lots of sort of Reaper figures, because Reapers do lots of sort of tavern people. I can see just down there in the middle of the Renedra tents, there's a lady with 6 foaming pints of beer. She's a
Renedra,
a Reaper barmaid. Yeah. So they fit very well into 17th century. Well, they do for me anyway. So
where's the windmill from?
That is Sarissa. So Sarissa do a nice post windmill, and I bought a couple of those for Lutzen, doing the Battle of Lutzen, which has a windmill hill. So it famously has some windmills. And then I noticed in looking through some of the pictures of Dirchau, there's a picture of Dirchau which has a windmill standing outside. So that was like, oh, brilliant! I can reuse my windmill.
Top.
Really
And you've just got piles of books or something underneath for your raised areas, have you?
Yeah. So I think there are some some of the old integral terrain foam hills, which you can just stick. But that's the other great thing with teddy bear fur. You can stick anything underneath. When we fight at a village hall, or we play toy soldiers at a village hall normally, and if we forget to bring any hills, you just scavenge through the kitchen and find tea trays and plates or anything you can fit under teddy bear fur to make hills. It's great.
Nice.
I hope nobody from the village hall's watching.
That's why I got. I keep finding bits of hair.
Teddy bear fur in their tea trays. So where did this come from?
Yeah,
that's funny.
Right.
Yeah,
crossing obstacles. Don't you need a FOGH machine to play Lutzen?
Yeah, that would look good, wouldn't it? Yes. Yeah, the fog of Lutzen.
I can tell you from experience of our school shows, running a smoke machine sets off fire alarms.
Yeah.
We had quite a bit of fun with that one year.
I bet. Yeah. So this is another view over the Swedish camp, and this is the Polish end. So you can see the poles all sort of split across the marsh. So it sort of brought these sort of marshy sections, and they're sort of trying to get themselves organised before they get run down by the Swedes. And in our refight of the battle, the Polish cavalry were played a blinder and had an absolutely awesome day. And so it was a major Polish victory on the day at Salute.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
because they managed to form up their shock cavalry and get in amongst the Swedes.
Yeah. So there was much muttering that the Polish winged hussars are too good in pike and shot. And I think since John Stallard himself from Warlord Games has bought an Ottoman army and is now having to fight Polish winged hussars, I think he's trying to put a lot of pressure on Steve to make Polish winged hussars not quite so good.
Right.
He's worried about his Ottoman janissaries getting run down.
Yeah. Sipahis and stuff, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Ottoman lancers with heavy armor. Well, they did win, though, right?
They got to be good because they certainly were, and they had a reputation even in the day, sort of thing. So, so that's it. So that's the last picture in my slideshow. You can see here the Polish infantry defending one of the crossing points as the Swedish cavalry are sweeping in bravely to take on those Polish hussars.
And there's no pike with those guys.
No. I mean, I think the argument was that if you've got Polish winged hussars, you don't need pikemen to defend you from the enemy cavalry.
Right. If you have to defend yourself from enemy cavalry, you've definitely lost.
It's all over. It's all over.
Yeah.
So, although as the century wore on, they did start to equip their formations with pike as well.
Right.
So they did have a period sort of by the 1680s where they started to have pikemen as well. But this period, it's thought they were just armed with muskets. Right.
I mean, this army, if you will, this way of fighting feels like, and I don't know whether this happened because I don't know the period, but it feels like it's just waiting for its Agincourt moment for the empire to collapse, because this is the elite of your culture group, right? that is the main fighting part of your army. Everybody's army had its cultural elites in it as the prestige units, but they weren't usually the ones doing all the fighting.
That's an interesting point. I think also one of the reasons the Poles struggled to field infantry was that they had a relatively large population, but the nobles who were fighting the battles didn't want the peasants going off to war because that would stop the peasants paying their rents and farming, and making money. So I think there's definitely sort of they tended to hire more people for infantry rather than they'd equip their own countrymen, sort of thing. And as you say, the equipping the hussars was fabulously, really, really expensive. And so as the century goes on, the number of hussars, the proportion of hussars drop, and they start to up armor their lighter cavalry.
Do the wings get smaller and smaller over time?
Well,
so they've just got a little hair on the back.
They probably get bigger, don't they?
Get bigger, yes.
Yeah. Bigger.
So this is at this period the wings are relatively straight and attached to the back of the saddle.
They don't yet hook round.
No, that's right. That's right. By the time you get to the 1680s, so Vienna, the Battle of Vienna, the hussar wings are on the back of attached to the back of the armor of the hussar, and then they loop right over the top in a really extravagant way. So they look amazing. But once again, did they wear them in battle? Who knows? So
but we know how those kind of things they do play visual tricks, and the same reason that like grenadier bearskins and shakos are all really tall, because it looks like those guys are bigger.
Yeah,
they look bigger than you.
Yeah, terrifying.
And that gets into the mind.
Yeah, and certainly, if there's a big guy covered in armor with these massive wings sprouting from the back of his horse, and he's got a sort of 5-meter lance, and he's wearing a tiger skin, and he's
and you've been told they've never lost a battle.
Yeah,
that's what you've heard.
Yeah,
so I'm out.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, did I leave that? Oh, yeah. Sorry, guys. I'll be back.
So so they certainly were really impressive troops, and they were, every time a Polish delegation went anywhere, they took there'd be some hussars. So there's a famous delegation go to France, and there's lots of the best illustrations from the 17th century of Polish outfits and stuff come from where they have gone abroad and had pictures painted of them because they're
quite eye-catching.
Yeah.
You remember this?
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your presentation. It was very nice. You say that was the last of your slides, yeah? Yeah.
I could go on probably for another hour and go through the detail of the two troops, the different troops. But perhaps we'll save that for another day.
Save that for another day, I think, Andy, if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
So if people want to see this demo game, are you taking it to other shows this year?
Yes. Now that's several people have asked me that, and I really should have thought that. I was so focused on completing this project and getting it ready for Salute, I didn't really think about it never occurred to me actually what to
book anywhere else.
To book anywhere else. So I'm not actually, because somebody said to me, "Oh, you must be going to Partisan." I can't make it to Salute. I'll see you at Partisan. I was like, "Well, I'm not going to Partisan."
Yeah, so you're not afraid, are you?
Yeah, I didn't think about that. So I must try and think about that. But
so with Warlord Games, then?
Get down to Warlord Day, mate.
Yeah, I think they've got another idea for a battle for their Warlord Open Day this year.
Oh.
What with you?
Oh.
Not well. I might be there, but it's a different, slightly different battle is being discussed.
This sounds like you know something.
He's not allowed to say, is he? We'll get it out of him after the show. We'll get it out of him. Don't you worry. If Paul Sawyer can show me his new Scots Covenanters, you can spill the beans. No. Where did we get to with our hobbying? I got some tofts on the basis of my German Panzer Grenadiers.
Nice.
John.
Oh, me? You coming to me? I've got all the black bits done on the Stuart. Almost. I'm just doing the tracks now, and then it's pretty much done.
Is it going to be Flaming Fanny?
It's actually going to be. I did work it out the other day. It's going to be Billy's elusive Flaming Fanny, using as many of the decals as I possibly can.
Right. One of the decals in that set says Flaming Fanny, by the way. Mike didn't just choose those words.
Oh, the other one was laxative, I think, or something like that, wasn't it, for the American?
Yeah, that's on the tank I can't actually use in my army. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
In this
the M5 Scott.
I can use it in mine, though, John.
True. Right. All my Marines. You've done a thing. I didn't realise you were actually doing a thing. So you've made the universal carrier. Huzzah. Did you were mentioning about using some different heads on that, Mike, when we were talking about it.
Heads on there.
Do they
look
work?
all right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So Warlord para heads fit on the universal carrier crew. For those that wanted to know that, which nobody did, but there you go.
All right. And Andy didn't do any hobbying because he's not a fool.
No, he was too busy explaining Dirchau and how he can't pronounce Polish names.
Yeah.
But everybody now knows all about the history of Poland and the Polish-Lithuanian.
Yeah, it's been a great day to be a Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth type dude.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks' time, we have got on Dwayne Plastic Crack Wargaming. We're going to talk about BattleTech. Specifically, I'm going to try and get him to talk to us a bit more about Alpha Strike. I know he's a bit of a purist, but I know he also knows how to play it. Yeah, and if I'm ever going to play BattleTech, it's not going to be with the hexes and the bean counting. I want to play the speedy version of the game. So I'm going to try and persuade him. And I'm also talking to him about doing some online multiplayer versus with the BattleTech. You know, the one with the turn-based one with the FOGH.
Okay, that's a thing. Sweet.
That is a thing. Yeah, that game. I quite enjoy playing the single player, so I reckon I can crush him. I reckon. And the last thing to say is kind of a bit out of the blue. I got phoned by Duncan today. If you remember Duncan's Band of Brothers, the guy who's got the Luke's APS made his Carantan boards and so forth. He's got all 4 of them. And I think the 4th one is just being finished. But he's going up to the Birmingham UK GE Games Expo. And he's asked us to come down on the Sunday and play a game on it. And Wally Mike has kindly agreed to drive. So if you're at the UK GE on Sunday, that's where we will be. Nothing else in the chat there. So I think that's us. Can we get you back to some more English Civil War, though, Andy? Sometime in the autumn, we go one of those. Where do I want to go next? I like the sounds of some of that fighting that was going on in the southwest.
Ah, good. The Cornishman. Yes. Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's rough cider and piracy, mate. It's all much more exciting down there, isn't it?
Pasties.
Yeah. Well, and that too. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.